In the last 10 years, I've built a six-figure art business, won dozens of awards, exhibited throughout the world, helped thousands of artists make money from their art. And this is the most comprehensive guide on how to make money as an artist available online. The first lesson is something I learned in the first art fair that I went to. So we arrive at the fair, I nervously unpacked my art and brought one test piece with me that I've tried to sold, but nobody wanted to buy it. I wanted to test it out on this fair. Anyway, my heart is pounding in my chest because I've paid thousands of dollars to be here, basically all of my savings, and so this fair needs to work. We install the work, and I tell to my friend to price the new test piece at $500. And when I came back from my round, I was absolutely blown away. The test piece actually sold. Now what's more is that she misunderstood what I said, and instead of pricing it at $500, she priced it at $5,000. Now it becomes more interesting. At the end of the fair, none of my $1,000 pieces sold. The pieces that actually had proof of work didn't sell, and the one piece that was accidentally mispriced was the one that was sold. And so I couldn't understand this. What is happening? How is this possible? And then a dealer explained this to me. She said, number one, collectors first see the price and then they see the art. And number two, collectors in London start to get interested at the 2 to 3K price point. Nothing below that. I bet if you would have priced your art higher, you would have sold more. And so this is a very powerful concept. I want you guys to understand context matters. A charcoal that is sold in a village gallery somewhere in Spain for $800 will be sold in a London gallery for $8,000. Same artist, same art, different context. There is something about the London art scene that enables galleries to charge 10 times more for the same art. And this is something that galleries don't want to talk about. They don't want to admit that an artwork that's being sold for 10K in London would be sold for $1,000 in a village gallery in Spain. And so a natural question that follows is, what do you say when a collector asks you why you charge $2,000 or why you charge $10,000? You can't really say, well, I'm here in London, so I price it 10 times higher than 2 weeks ago in Bangladesh. You can't really say that. And so how do you go about it? How do you explain those price points? Well, this is where we get towards these pricing formulas. Some artists will use a price per inch formula, $5 per inch, for example, but this is not really reliable. Other artists will do something like hours plus material cost, but this is also kind of BS. Let's take the following example. Let's take an artist that spends 20 hours on a particular piece, and then another artist that is less good, less efficient, and just less skilled, and they will spend 60 hours to get an artwork of the same quality. Now, does this mean that the better artist, who was more efficient, should charge 3 times less because they were faster? Of course not. This doesn't make any sense. And so the hourly rate plus material costs is just a bad method. As a painter, I oftentimes, when I'm painting, experience some kind of flow state where somehow, for some reason, everything just goes way better. Everything goes automatic. Everything goes smooth. And the paintings that are created in those states, they are not only created faster, but they're just better paintings. These are my favorite paintings. And so what happens when you have a favorite painting? Well, you will market it more. You will talk about it more. You will put it in the spotlight more. And so naturally, that will have an impact on the price of those paintings. In other words, oftentimes, the less time I spend on a particular painting, the more I will charge for that painting, because hourly rate just doesn't really matter that much. There's this beautiful story about Picasso that blew my mind away the first time I heard it, that illustrates this perfectly. So he's doodling on a napkin in some kind of restaurant, and he's about to throw it away. And before he can throw it away, a woman stops him in his tracks and says, wow, that's beautiful. Can I buy this? How much would you charge? And Picasso replies with $5,000. Now, she's obviously shocked. She's blown away. How can you charge $5,000 for a doodle on a napkin that you were about to throw away? Not to mention that it only took you a couple of minutes to make this. And Picasso replied, well, it only took me minutes to make, but it took me a lifetime to get the skill sets to make it in a couple of minutes. And he walked off. Now, this is something that we see Picasso and all other great artists do. They spend a lifetime becoming so good they can't be ignored. And then, After spending that lifetime, they can indeed charge a couple of €1,000 for an hour of work. Abraham Lincoln famously said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend 4 hours sharpening the axe." Sharpening the axe is becoming so good that you can't be ignored. You intuitively already know that. You intuitively know that you have to train and become that good. That's why you're watching this video. But how are you going to become that good? Everything in the art world is gatekept. Everybody keeps all of their information secret. If you read autobiographies, you will find things about the artistic elements. But nobody is talking about how they sold art. Nobody is talking about how they got in their first gallery. Nobody is talking about the business side of the arts in those autobiographies. And so how do you actually learn to become an artist? The first step into creating an art business is learning. Learning is the thing that will set you free. You already know this. I knew this. That's why I was doing all of the research. I didn't know how to sell art. I didn't know anything about the art market. And I wanted to fill those holes of information with knowledge so that I wouldn't be afraid of making the wrong move. I wouldn't be afraid or paralyzed because I didn't know what to do. Now, this is the first trap that I fell into. Does this actually work? Does increasing the amount of knowledge you have decrease the amount of fear that you have, decrease the amount of things that you don't know? Well, not really. The more you know that you don't know. And as I was researching, as I was studying, there were constantly things that would pop up that I didn't even knew I didn't know. And so the amount of unknown increased, the amount of fear increased, and the amount of paralysis that came with that also increased. And so the more I was studying, the less I was doing. And thinking, studying, is simply not doing, and without doing there is no art business. And so the reality is that learning and researching is oftentimes a way to procrastinate. Procrastination knows that when you learn more, your paralysis will increase, your fears will increase, you will do less, which is what procrastination wanted in the first place. And so how can we solve this learning problem, this learning dilemma? Well, most artists will solve it through the efficiency method, which is exactly what I tried. The efficiency method is very simple. You learn until you know the most efficient way of doing something, and then you simply do it with self-discipline and willpower. But does this actually work? Can you in fact figure out the most efficient way of doing things? So here's what would happen for me. I would be learning, and then I would stumble upon a way to do something, an efficient way of doing something. And then I would ask myself if that is in fact the most efficient way, because I was too afraid to waste my time on a particular method that was just not efficient enough, that was not the right way. I was afraid that the art establishment would look at my ways and then laugh with them. Then be like, this guy clearly doesn't know what he's doing. And so then I would go back into research mode, trying to figure out the most efficient way. And this is the second trap that most artists fall into. They try to find the most efficient way, but most efficient is an expression of procrastination. Any way will do. Doing is more important than thinking. I want you to ask a question to yourself. How many masterpieces are gathering dust in the corner of your studio because you are too afraid to make the wrong move? Are you holding on to efficiency and learning and research so tightly that you're choking out the possibility of becoming a full-time artist? And when I say masterpieces in the corner of your room, I in fact mean masterpieces. I've seen some of the artworks that you guys make. I can't speak for everyone, but some of you are making insane stuff. It's absolutely amazing. And you're not even posting it online. You're not even trying to put it online for sale somewhere. It's insane. Stop letting perfectionism rob you from your dreams. And so how can you solve this problem? Well, the solution lies in the 90-10 rule. The 90-10 rule is a very simple rule that will enable you to never face these problems. 10% learning, 90% doing. That's it. That's the 90-10 rule. Make sure that you're weak,
your month, your year is divided in 10% learning and 90% doing. Now, once you have the 10% going, we also have to think about the 90% because this is the most important thing. This is where everything will happen. This is where your art career stands or falls. Now, what I see a lot of artists doing during that 90% time, and what I saw myself doing, is spending a lot of time painting, which makes sense. Painting takes a lot of time. It's extremely hard. You have to be really good and you have to train in order to become really good. And so you're gonna spend a lot of time painting. Sometimes I see artists spend 10 years, 15 years just painting, and then they have hundreds of artworks in their studio ready for something they've never tried because they've never tried to sell it. They've never went online and post about their art, and then after 10, 15 years they regret that. They think that it's too late to start working on the business side of things, and they regret not doing that earlier. And so doing things during that 90% time is also extremely hard. A lot of artists, including myself, don't find a good balance between making art and doing the business side of things, selling art, marketing their art, doing the taxes, whatever it is they need to do. And so how can we solve this problem? Well, we have to split up this 90% time into two portions. 30% time making art and 70% time on your business, marketing, taxes, selling, all of those things. And so as you can see and probably already know, consistency is pretty hard. And the first question we have to ask ourselves is, do we actually need to be consistent? Now, this seems like a very easy question, but it's actually a very foundational question and pretty hard and pretty substantial to answer. At first sight, it looks like it's a clear yes, of course you need to be consistent. You've heard about the 10,000 hour rule before that states that you need 10,000 hours to perfect your craft, to become somewhat of an expert in any given field. And how are you going to achieve these 10,000 hours? Well, through consistency. But let's think a little bit more about this. Let's take the following example. You say to yourself that you need to make 2 paintings and 5 sketches every single week in order to be consistent. 2 paintings and 5 sketches, that's designed to torture yourself. It has nothing to do with consistency. Consistency doesn't work like this. You made it up. You told yourself 2 paintings and 5 sketches, but this is a made up number. There are a lot of artists in the art world who only make 8 paintings a year, sell them for millions, are extremely rich, extremely successful, extremely happy, and everything that you want to be. And then there are also artists who make 100 paintings or 200 paintings. Picasso made like 60,000 artworks or something like that. I don't know the exact number, but you get the idea. It all depends on your strategy, your personality, your type of workflow. And so in many cases, consistency can be a trap that artists fall into and that they use to torture themselves. And so how can you solve this problem? Well, you have to understand how to set goals for yourself and not use those outcome-based goals. For example, 2 paintings a week, or I need to make 100 social media posts a month, or 100 every 6 months. All of those types of goals are just designed to torture yourself. What you need is process-based goals, where you say to yourself, well, this week I will spend 4 hours making art. This week I will spend 4 hours doing social media or building a community or whatever it is that you want to do. And so let's say you solve this problem. You have process-based goals. You understand your own type of consistency and how you sometimes use this to torture yourself and all of that stuff. Then we still didn't actually solve the initial problem and answer the initial question, which is, how are you going to actually do the things? Because doing things is very hard. We've all tried to eat healthy. We've all tried to do workouts several times a week and become jacked or whatever it is that you try to do. And then after a couple of months, we didn't actually do the work. And so how can we make sure that with the right goals, we do the work consistently every single week? Well, the process that I like to use is called, it's not actually called that process, I just made that up, but I call it the 3-level habit formula. And it's very simple. Instead of having one thing, one habit that you need to develop, for example, let's say you want to draw on a weekly basis and you say to yourself, well, I need to draw 2 hours a day. That is not the process that I would recommend. What I would recommend is have 3 levels of habits. One level the first level that is extremely easy, something that you can always do no matter what. Then a level 2 habit that is moderately hard, and a level 3 habit that would be your ideal day where you do everything perfectly. So let's say you want to draw a particular amount of time a day. Let's say you want to draw 1 hour a day and you want to achieve this goal, this habit 3 months from now, 6 months from now, whatever. The first habit, the easy habit, is for example drawing one circle in your sketchbook. Pretty goddamn easy. There's not a single thing that can happen during the day that would prevent you from doing this. This literally takes 30 seconds. Then habit number 2 would be going through a complete warm-up session where you take one page out of your sketchbook or just a printer page or something, and you draw some circles, you draw some lines, you practice the stability in your hand, whatever it is that you want to do. Then habit level 3 is making an actual drawing. Working on your drawing for 1 hour entirely, the perfect habit, the thing that you want to establish. Now you already see how this 3-level habit formula actually solves the problem. Most people have only level 3 habits. They only have all or nothing scenarios where they either do something that's really hard, a complete workout session, a complete painting, a complete drawing, a complete whatever, and that inevitably results in them not doing anything for a couple of days straight, and then they go to level 3 habits again, and then level 0 habits, and level 3 and level 0, and you get it. This dance between all or nothing just simply doesn't work. It's actually, again, a expression of procrastination, because procrastination knows that level 3 habits are way too hard, that you're not going to do them every single day, that you are inevitably going to quit, and most likely will keep on quitting for a very long time, which is what procrastination wanted in the first place. And so this 3-level habit formula is ideal. You can use it for everything: eating, working out, painting, posting on social media, whatever it is that you want to do in your life. Now, once you have the perfect way to learn, the perfect way to build consistency, habits, the best types of goals, process-based goals, everything that you want, we need to go towards the most important part, which is building a community of art collectors, art enthusiasts, fellow artists that can cheer you on, that can buy your work, and that can make this art career a reality. Now, when it comes to building a community, the first thing that you hear everybody talking about is social media as the utmost best opportunity the art world has ever seen, the first equalizer of the art world, the democratizer that gives every artist equal chances and all of that stuff. And I've said those things on my channel myself because there's something true about that. But, and this is very important, I want you to realize that you don't actually need to become an influencer in order to become an artist. You can just become an artist with other trajectories. Some artists are simply too introverts. They don't like to be on camera. They don't like to play the social media game. They don't like the pressure of constantly having to upload. They don't like the fact that their art becomes content, and that every time they make an artwork they're thinking about, oh yeah, this becomes content on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and then their artworks are changing because of that. And so it's totally fine to disregard those opportunities, and for some that will absolutely be the smartest thing to do. And if I'm really honest, I sometimes think I went a little bit too far, a little bit too hard into this social media game myself. A couple of years ago I was doing the traditional route. I was having a lot of exhibitions: Berlin, Milan, London, Buenos Aires, you name it, and I was walking that path. And then I saw social media. I saw these artists, average artists, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds getting thousands of likes, tens of thousands of views, and I thought to myself, hey, wait a minute, there are only 80 people coming to the opening, or 60 people, or in some cases 40 people. So who am I really reaching, and shouldn't I also do this social media trajectory? And then I started doing that. A year later or 2 years later, COVID happened, and there were no exhibitions anymore, so I started putting more time on that. And the reality is that I kind of, to some extent, traded my soul or my values for vanity metrics, likes and views and things that don't even matter. Here's what happens. At some point I made a video. This is a 2-year-old video with a title, How to Sell Art Online, the basics, something like that. I put a lot of time in this video, days, whatever, writing scripts, editing, the whole thing, and it got 300 views, 400 views, whatever. And the click-through rate was very low, and so I changed the thumbnail. From whatever the thumbnail was, I don't remember what the thumbnail was, I changed it to $10,000 a month, something like that, you know, suggesting that you could make that if you watch this video and the whole thing. And the video went from a couple of hundred views to 80,000 views instantly just by changing the thumbnail. And so I was mind blown. It was the same video. I mean, just changing the thumbnail resulted in a difference of 100x, 200x in views. I mean, that's insane. And also the money that comes with that. And so I realized that I needed better thumbnails, better titles, that my click-through rate needed to be way higher. And so I went on a journey to improve the titles. And looking back at some of my titles, looking back at some of my videos, these are not in line with the initial values that I had when I started YouTube. When I started YouTube, I thought I will never, ever in a million years do clickbait or anything that is even remotely clickbait on my channel. If I look back at some of the videos now, some of it is definitely borderline clickbait. Some of it is definitely a little bit too far. And so did I sacrifice some of my values in function of something that doesn't even matter? Probably to some extent. Do I regret that? Probably to some extent. Most definitely a lot, actually. So this is what social media will do to you if you're not prepared, and it's very hard to be prepared of that. If you're not prepared, you will be making those mistakes. And so anyway, this is a very long rant just to ask one question: how can we solve this problem? How can we make sure that we don't make those mistakes that I made? How can we make sure that we never trade our values, our personality, or whatever it is for vanity metrics while generating success for ourselves, while developing that art career? And the solution is the 1,000 fans theory. The theory of 1,000 true fans is absolutely amazing and simply states that you only need 1,000 true fans to make all your dreams come true. You don't need 10,000, you don't need 100,000 views or 1,000,000 views or 10 million views. You just need 1,000 people that are there for you, that support you emotionally and financially. And so let's do the math to see how that actually works. So let's say you have 1,000 people that would pay you, let's say, an average of $9 a month. That's multiplied by 9, multiplied by 12, because there are 12 months in a year. That would be $108,000 that you would be getting on a yearly basis. That's a real thing. That's a real income as an artist. A lot of artists, the far majority of artists, don't even come close to that. Suddenly, everything becomes realistic because 1,000 people feels real. 1,000 people feels doable. 1 million doesn't, but 1,000 feels real. This is very realistic. And this solves the problem that a lot of artists have of being completely overwhelmed, in that they need to become famous in order to become an artist, in that they need 1 million views or 10 million views or whatever they think they need. This is simply not real. The moment you make this mindset shift and realize you only need 1,000, you don't have to go for silly, sneaky, clickbait type of strategy in order to kind of get to vanity metric results or something. You can just be yourself, be true to who you are, and slowly build that community out. Now, once you understand how to build a community, how to price your art, how to sell your art, you also need a place to sell your art. Now, there are a lot of places out there. There are online galleries, Amazons, Etsy's, but those places become extremely saturated very fast, especially with AI nowadays. Everything is getting flooded, and so some of you will want to work with established marketplaces, established institutions, like, for example, galleries, like, for example, museums. But here's the thing. If you apply, you are one of the hundreds of artists that send them emails. Every gallery that is worth it is getting hundreds of emails a week. This is insane. And so how do you get through to those decision makers? Well, you simply don't. There is an other door to get in. There is an other door to get their attention and make sure that they want to work with you so that you don't have to apply to all of those institutions anymore. And the way I discovered the secret all started sitting in a peaceful park, sun is shining, a common nightingale chirping, and I'm completely overwhelmed and stressed out because I'm applying for galleries but had no clue on how to actually do that. After weeks of applying, I get an invitation. Drenched in excitement, I rush to the gallery. The gallery lady goes through my art and she stops at this one particular piece. I'll show you. And then she looks at me, and I will never forget the word she said. She said, "Dries, I'm going to be very honest. Your art is just ugly. We can't possibly sell this." It felt like a stab in my gut. I drove home close to tears, full of self-doubt, wondering by myself, what if this is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? What if I will never get an invitation anymore? What if my art is indeed ugly? What if I'm wasting my time chasing this unrealistic dream? I felt worthless. And then the strangest thing happens. Several years later, the same gallery reached out again. Before I opened the email, I took a deep breath, remembering the past pain, and the email read, Dries, I'm going to be very honest. Your art is absolutely amazing. We would love to sell it even more. Further in the email, she even praised a particular artwork called Engraved Room Number 9. You guessed it, the same art that they were laughing with several years earlier. And you know what's really baffling about it all? The motto of the gallery, stated in big letters on their website, was, "Art, like wine, gets better with time." What? Art like wine gets better with time. What are you talking about? The art they praised was the same art they laughed with. And so it wasn't the art that aged. It was the perception of the art that aged. And so the follow-up question becomes, what was it that changed their perception? And how can you use that to turn haters into raving fans? Let me show you with a couple of examples what I believe is one of the most powerful observations artists, gallerists, collectors can make. On the left side you see Spiritus Calidus by John Le Carre, a skull made out of crystals. On the right side you see For the Love of God by Damien Hirst, a skull made out of diamonds. Now John Le Carre was friends with Damien Hirst and accused him of stealing his ID. Let me give you another example. On the left side you see John Le Carre's Yin and Yang, made in 1990. On the right side you see Damien Hirst's Him, made in 1999. Now 1999? Anyway, again, John Le Carre accused Damien Hirst of stealing his ID. Now, I personally believe that both of these IDs are stolen from some kind of science book. It's literally science stories. But anyway, there's this battle going on. Let me give you another example. On the right side, you see the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. A shark in a tank, made in 1991 by Damien Hirst. After he made this artwork, a report came out that it was possibly a stolen ID from Eddie Saunders, who had a shark in a vitrine that he called Shark in a Tank, made in 1989. Now let me give you one more example, the best example that I found. On the left side you see Thomas Downing's spot paintings, and on the right side you see Damien Hirst's spot paintings. So spot the difference and let me know in the comment section. Now, why am I showing you these examples? What does this have to do with the perception of an artwork? Now, before we explain how Damien Hirst controls the perception around his art and then pushes it up to insane heights, let's first take a look at these examples and draw some conclusions from them. If we look at Thomas Downing's work, we can see that he was original, that he was the first, that he was unique, that he was breaking a status quo and developing something, a unique art style that was not done before him, or at least not that I know of. Yet, Damien Hirst is running away with all the profits. And so what can we conclude from this? Well, art styles probably don't matter as much as we want to believe. I see artists struggling to find their art styles all of the time, worried about the fact that they don't have an art style yet, and that might be the reason that they are not succeeding, that they don't get the views, that they don't get the likes, that they don't get the comments, when in reality, what we can see here is that art styles are overrated. Originality is overrated. Being the first, being unique is simply overrated. Now, does this mean that we don't have to be original, don't have to be unique, don't have to develop our own art style? No, of course not. It's going to help, it's going to be beneficial, but it cannot be our sole purpose. We have to do something else, because art styles or uniqueness will not result in money. The second conclusion is that bad marketing is good marketing and good marketing is good marketing. There are even people who say that plagiarizing or copy-pasting elements from other artists is actually a marketing strategy in and of itself, because writers, critics will see this as an opportunity to write about that particular artist, that famous artist that is plagiarizing other artists, resulting in a lot of views, a lot of readers that can then be used to put advertisements on their blogs and then get more money, and the whole thing is going. And because it is so predictable that critics will do that, you could potentially abuse that. It's just like Andy Warhol said, don't pay attention to what they write about you, just measure it in inches. Now, I personally don't know if this is a strategy that is actually good and if this is something that is used by top level artists, but it certainly is an interesting concept to think about. So let's go back to the main question. Why is it that Damien Hirst dot paintings are selling for millions while Thomas Downing, in comparison to Damien Hirst, is selling for peanuts, or at least way less? I mean, still a lot of money, but You get the point. Well, the difference between Damien Hirst and Thomas Downing is, of course, marketing. Damien figured out how to get eyeballs towards his work, how to change perception, how to elevate his work through manipulating perception, while Thomas Downing didn't figure that out. Why is it that the gallery suddenly became interested in my art? Because the art was getting some traction. First, nobody cared about me, and then slowly but steadily, people started paying attention. That's the only difference. Seth Godin said the following: people do not buy goods and services. They buy relations, stories, and magic. And the way to get out relations, stories, and magic is to talk to people. And talking to people is what we call in business marketing. To illustrate this point even further, let's take a look at the most expensive painting, the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. Why is it that this artwork is so famous? Is it because of the smile Da Vinci painted? Is it because something else that he painted? Networking, whatever. No. It's because of one single story. If you look at the history of the Mona Lisa, painted 500 years ago, the first couple of 100 years, nobody really cared about the painting. Sure, it went through some famous hands and eventually it was hung in the Louvre Museum, but it was not one of the top 50 paintings in that museum. Nobody went to the Louvre Museum to visit the Mona Lisa until in 1911 the painting got stolen and journalists started writing about it and the whole thing blew up. It became a mysterious painting with a mysterious story. Where is it? Who stole it? Everybody started creating conspiracy theories around it and the media jumped on it with story after story after story. And so for decades on end, people were flocking to the Louvre Museum to watch the empty spot on the wall. The empty spot became more famous than the Mona Lisa ever was before that. And then the painting got found, it was hanging in the Louvre, and it was famous ever since. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that if this painting would have not been stolen in 1911, we would not value the Mona Lisa the same way we do now. The Mona Lisa would not be the most famous painting in the world. And so the only reason that the Mona Lisa is what it is today is because of marketing, because of the story, because of eyeballs, attention that it got from 1911. And so what does this mean for artists? Well, it means that marketing is the #1 skill. It's the skill that rules them all, the skill that makes all other skills obsolete, and the skill that amplifies everything else you do in your art career. It's the difference between Damien Hirst and Thomas Downing. In many ways, sales is just a form of bad marketing. Networking is just a form of bad marketing. Applying to galleries is just a form of bad marketing. If you market properly, you don't have to apply anymore because those galleries will contact you. And you could say, well, you could have improved your application skills or your pitch writing skills or email, cold approach type of skills, but that would have probably resulted in more rejection. And I could have used all of that time to just build my marketing skills, to build my storytelling skills. And that is the choice that you make as an artist. And I believe that putting all of the time in marketing is probably the smarter thing to do. And so then the question becomes, how did Damien Hirst market his art and get the success that he got? And what can we learn from that? What can we apply ourselves to get, hopefully, somewhat similar results? The first thing we see is that Damien Hirst not just makes paintings, but a diverse range of artworks: paintings, sculptures, installations, large-scale public works, conceptual art, all of that stuff. And so what happens if you do that? Well, you will reach a broader audience because some people love paintings and some people love sculptures. The second thing we see Hirst doing is that he expands his brand by going into different markets: retail, publishing, even developing his own restaurant with the whole pharmacy thing, and also collaborating with other brands in different markets, like Supreme Clothes, for example, or Tiffany & Co. And so what can we learn from this as artists? Well, a lot of times we are afraid to be sellout artists, to destroy our brand with things that are too economical in nature. But if we see these top level artists doing that, we can question whether or not that is just our own personal insecurity stalking and not a valid strategy to follow. Another thing we see Damien Hirst do is making artworks that are so controversial that they kind of market themselves. For example, 100 years, the artwork that I showed earlier, where you have one cow head in one room where flies breed on the cow head, feed on the cow head, and then they go into the other room where there's a light attracting those flies and killing those flies, and you have this whole life cycle going on. Now, this is a very controversial work. It was so controversial that PETA, some animal rights organization, decided to challenge that, sue him for that, and take it way out of museums. And so what happens is that you have this whole story blowing up out of nowhere, where a lot of media institutions, a lot of journalists hop onto that and then start talking about that. And so again, bad marketing is good marketing here. Now, I personally don't understand why PETA would do something like this, because this is obviously challenging the whole animal rights thing in a positive daylight and bringing it to the awareness of the public. And so I don't see any problem with this. Apparently, they don't have better things to do than challenging artworks in museums, but that's for another video. And so what does this mean for artists? Well, we should probably ask ourselves before making the artwork if there is something that we could do in the creative process that would make this artwork more marketable, or that would make it interesting in some kind of way. And the simple act of asking yourself that question will open up new windows, new ideas, new ways to market your art. Another thing we see Damien Hirst do is to sell with galleries, famous galleries like a Gaussian gallery, for example, but also bypassing the traditional system and selling directly to the public. For example, with his show in Sotheby's called Beautiful Inside My Head Forever. And in that show, he sold for a total of 111 million pounds. Now that's some serious money. And so what can we learn from that as artists? Well, apparently using galleries as a sales venue is not necessary anymore. You can in fact directly sell to the public. And so using galleries in a way that it's a mutual beneficial experience where they build up your brand a little bit and you give them a little bit of attention because you have a social media following, for example, that's great. But thinking that galleries are the only place to sell art, that's probably something from the past. And then the last thing we see him do is using social media platforms. Now, social media platforms are the cheapest form of marketing on this list, but they're also pretty hard, potentially even the hardest form of marketing on this list. But what's more is that this is the only marketing strategy on this list that is 100% fair. Social media is a game of skill. Whoever gets the highest CTR, the highest average view duration, and the highest average view per viewer will win the game. And so there are no gatekeepers on social media. That's why it's so amazing. That's why it's probably one of the best choices for beginner artists, because it's so cheap and because it's so democratic in nature.
Now, once you understand what these top level artists do, what the Damien Hirst in the world do, you also have to understand what not to do. Avoiding the mistakes is more important than doing the right things. I've noticed this heavily when working out. You can work out with the best workout programs, with the best coaches, with the best diets, eat extremely healthy, do massive amounts of weights, also do cardio, and also sleep amazingly. But then, with one simple mistake, you can still screw it up. For example, if you eat too much healthy food, you will still look fat and you will still not see your six-pack. And so avoiding the mistakes is absolutely massive. I can tell you, as somebody who achieved an average physique, that by just avoiding the mistakes, you can get a six-pack. Just avoiding the mistakes alone. And this is not only true in working out. This is true in making money. This is true in business. Some of you already look like a god. You're just covering it up by making one mistake, namely eating too much. Some of you already have the communication skills, have the building skills, have the sales skills, have whatever skills that you need. You're just covering it up by making a stupid mistake. For example, what I see a lot. People who have 20, 30, 40, 50,000 followers, and they are reaching those followers, and everybody is engaged, and their art is amazing, and everything is working tremendously well, and then they don't put their website or any link for any CTA in their bio. You know what's gonna happen? By that simple mistake, you screw everything up, because nobody's now going to buy your work. If you make it too hard for people to buy your work by not even providing a link, then nobody is going to buy your work. Now, in order to find the biggest mistakes, I've asked tens of thousands of artists to fill out hundreds of posts, and then I've spent days scanning all of those posts to find the biggest mistakes of them all. And the first one is what I call the Michelangelo effect.
It's the 16th century and Michelangelo is working on David in his studio, one of the best sculptures ever made, and he has a big problem. Here's the thing, his patron Piero Soderini walks in the studio. Now Piero considers himself somewhat of an art connoisseur, and so he walks in the studio, he looks at David and he says to Michelangelo, the nose is too big, you have to change it. Now this annoys Michelangelo deeply because the nose is absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with the nose, and if he would change the nose, then he would destroy the artwork. Now, Michelangelo also understands that if he disagrees with the fragile egos of the patrons, that he will lose his career, because those are different times. You cannot simply disagree with the overlords at that time. You are working for them, and not the other way around. If they say that you're going to do something, you have to do it. And this is a turning point in history. So here's what he did. He grabs his hammer and his chisel, and also grabs some marble dust from the ground, and then he goes up on the scaffolding and asks Soderini to follow him, and he starts working on the nose, and he makes loud noises with his hammer and chisel, and every time the hammer hits the chisel, he lets some marble dust fall from his hand. He's not actually working on the nose, he's pretending to work on the nose. Now at this moment his heart is pounding in his chest, because if Soderini figures out that he is fooling him, that he is pretending, then he most certainly loses his career. And so he's working, pretending, and after it's finished, he asks Soderini, what do you think? And Soderini replies, it's absolutely gorgeous, you made the statue come to life. Michelangelo understood that by arguing with someone, he doesn't achieve anything, he only makes the other person feel inferior. And that can only lead towards micro-revenge afterwards. Now, why is this story so important? Why is this one of the most powerful stories you can hear as an artist? Well, in my surveys, I asked artists the following thing. What would you do when a patron asks to make a change? 13% of artists said, politely refuse with clear communication, artwork comes first. Now, what happens with those artists who will say that? Most of them will not get any funding afterwards. Most of them will lose clients, will lose their audience, and will subsequently just make less money over time. Only 6% of artists said that they would do what Michelangelo would do, and luckily only 14% of artists said, adjust the art so that it fits the patron's request, because the client comes first. The client comes first. This is something that we hear all of the time. Customer comes first, client comes first. But what happens with those artists who actually execute on that? Well, in that case, we get the Hollywood phenomenon. There hasn't been a single movie in the last 15 years that reached the top 20 movies of all time, even though Hollywood has better cameras, better equipment, more money, more everything. And so what is happening here? Why is that? Why are they making a remake of Snow White and then erasing the prince from the storyline because it's not woke enough? These writers know that that's an important part of the story. They know that that is a juxtaposition with the evil queen, that it is a heroic character, that it is some kind of plot twist in the story, and they're just erasing. They know that they're not doing what Michelangelo did. They know that they are just dancing to the strings of the overlords who don't know anything about storytelling, who don't know anything about making art. And so why are these writers sacrificing that? Here's the thing. They are supposed to be the best writers in the world. Sure, they can manipulate language to then fool the patron overlords by adding some woke stuff subtly without actually destroying the storyline and then still making a great movie. Sure, they must be able to do that. And so why are they not doing that? Well, the simple answer is that they just suck. They're just not the best writers in the world. The Michelangelos of today's society, the Michelangelos of the 21st century, they are not working for Hollywood anymore. Now that's enough for our little rant. A more important question that we should ask ourselves is, how can we use this Michelangelo strategy so that we can manipulate perception and make everyone happy? And with manipulate, I don't mean the bad side of manipulation. I don't mean manipulating so that you can benefit from it. That just makes you a bad human being. What I mean is manipulation in function of other people, in function of the audience, in function of the collector, in function of people that you are serving. Well, let's take a look at how the best galleries in the world are doing exactly that. If you go to New York City and you go to one of the galleries, we subconsciously know that the galleries are paying a lot of money to stand there. In New York City Center, you are paying 20k, 25k, 30k a month in rent to have a shop there. And so you walk inside of that shop shop, you obviously expect that the gallery owner or the shop owner is using the real estate wisely because they're paying so much. And what do you see? You see an empty wall with one painting hanging inside. You see an empty gallery with just one painting hanging inside. And so this is the exact opposite of what you expect. And that is why it feels so luxurious. Subconsciously, we know that to hang that painting there for 1 month, it already takes $30,000. And you see this trick being used all over the place. If you go to an electronics shop where they sell phones and you go to all the phones, you will see a table with 100 phones, all of the phones displayed. And then you go to the Apple section and what do you see? You see the same table with just one phone displayed. Apple is using that trick. Subconsciously, we know that it's expensive to be there in that shop, and Apple is showing that. Just one phone. That's it. That's how you create that vibe of luxuriousness, because you don't want them to think that the phone is the exact same phone as all the other phones, which it is, by the way. It is the exact same phone. And so what do? Well, you create that empty space, and that is not just what Apple wants, it's what the customer wants. The customer wants Apple to market their products in a way that those products feel more luxurious than all the other products, so that they can walk around with their Apple, with their Basquiat, with their Rothko, with whatever they want to walk around with. Yeah, they're obviously not going to walk around with the Mark Rothko, but hanging in their home. And those customers want that product to showcase luxuriousness, to showcase uniqueness. And you can do that with something as simple as empty space. Now, besides this empty space trick, there are obviously a dozen other tricks, and I've made a free 20-page PDF guide for art fairs for beginner artists, and in that guide I share some of those tricks. There's one trick, for example, where you can use lights to manipulate things in a particular way, just like you can use empty space. I will share the PDF for free at the end of the video. The third mistake has something to do with 15th century prostitution, and from this point on, let's refer to them as adult service workers. Let me explain. So in the 15th century, these adult service workers had an amazing business model because every single guy wanted what they had to offer. But they also believed in the Christian values. They believed in God. They believed that this thing, adult service work, was a sinful thing that would put them in hell. And so they wanted to figure out a way to go to heaven, but also to make money along the way. Now, Christianity saw this demand in the marketplace, and so what did they do? Well, they created indulgences that people could buy to purify themselves from their sins, to release themselves from their sins. And so here's what would happen. These adult service workers would work, then make money, then feel guilty and sinful, and so they would buy indulgences to release themselves from their sin, and then they would have no money anymore because they just spend it on indulgences, and so they have to work again as adult workers, and you get the point. The circle is round. Perhaps this sounds familiar. It's actually very similar to modern day consumerism, where people are working a job they hate to buy stuff they don't need, to impress people they don't even like. Now, what does all of this have to do with artists? What does all of this have to do with selling your art online? Well, let's think about this. Why did these adult service workers buy indulgences? Well, they simply believed that what they were doing was a sin. But in the 21st century, a lot of people would argue that it is actually not sinful at all. I'm not going to make that argument. Some people believe it's sinful, other people don't believe it's sinful. But it's easy for us to see that if those 15th century adult service workers would believe it is not sinful, would believe some of those 21st century ideals, they would not need to buy indulgences. They would not need to spend their profits on an invented thing that the church made up. And with those extra profits, they might even be able to upgrade their life and stop adult service work altogether, because they might not even want to do that. It might be out of necessity that they need to do that. And so what does this have to do with selling art? Well, through my research, I figured out that a lot of people, a lot of artists believe that selling their art or commercializing their art in some way is sinful. They just don't call it sinful, they call it selling out. And so we have the same vicious cycle. I remember deeply being afraid of selling out my work. I believed that being seen as a sellout artist would be the death sentence of my career, and that the moment somebody would think that, it would be over for me. And so this vicious cycle results in the following thing. I hated my life and I hated my job, and I dreamed of becoming a full-time artist. But because I believed in the sellout myth, I I would not be making money, and then I would go on YouTube figuring out how to make money from my art. I would be watching hours and hours and hours, but because I believed in this sellout myth, I would never actually execute on any of the ideas. And so because I wasn't executing, I wasn't making any money. Because I wasn't making any money, I would go back to that job, hating it even more and dreaming of becoming a full-time artist even more, and the vicious cycle is round. Now, how many artists are suffering from this myth? Well, let's take a look. I asked artists, what do you consider most as selling out? And only 29% of artists said that selling out is a myth and doesn't actually exist. 71% of artists are falling for this trap. And so how do you stop this vicious cycle? Well, it's as simple as just stop believing in the sellout artist myth. The sellout artist myth is not real. It's just like Andy Warhol said. Making money is art, and working is art, and good business is the best art. The reality is that selling art is not real. There never has been an artist that at the end of their life thought by themselves, wow, I wish I sold less art. I wish I sold less art so that people wouldn't have believed that I was a sellout artist. That never happened. No artist ever in history of humanity thought that at the end of their life. And so you have to stop believing in this myth.
Now, the biggest mistake of them all is something that you will not see coming, because it goes against everything that you stand for, everything that you think you should be doing as an artist. It's like the #1 essence of artists that you should not be doing. The biggest mistake is selling original art. Selling original art is the worst thing an artist can do, because it's making it yourself as hard as possible. What you should be doing instead is make it yourself as easy as possible with the law of least effort. If you look at the best artists in the world, the Damien Hirsts, the Jeff Koonses, the richest artists, the smartest artists, they are not selling any original art. They are not selling art at all. They sell something else. And the reason they sell something else is because selling original art is extremely dumb. If you ask a business guy what their worst nightmare is, what the worst case scenario is, what hell would look like for them, they would say that hell is a place where you are forced to make a new product every time you sold your product. AKA the business model of an artist. They would literally say the business model of an artist is the worst case scenario, is hell. And so that is not what Damien Hirst did. Damien Hirst didn't follow the business model of artists, because that business model doesn't actually work. Damien Hirst made a particular product once, and then he sold that over and over again. He has been selling the same product thousands of times over the last decade or two. And so Damien Hirst asked himself, what would this art career look like if this would be easy? What would it look like if this would be a piece of cake, aka the law of least effort? Let me explain what I mean with that. The world changed forever the moment Hollywood figured out how to sell momentum instead of movies. So here's what happened. Hollywood made movies. Everybody loved movies. Hollywood made millions. Everybody loved the millions. And then there was this one guy. Let's call him John. He's an intern at some Hollywood firm, some Hollywood department, whatever. John wants to make a name for himself, and so he develops what he believes is a genius business model. He says to the top guys, I believe that we have to sell movies at a different format, a higher format with higher quality, but we sell the same movies. We sell the same exact movie. Now, the executives in the room, they laugh him out of the room. They think, John, what a dumb idea. Why in the hell would people buy the exact same movie again? Just because it's a different format? Who the fuck would ever do that? Now, it should have been over right then and there, but John was persistent. John didn't give up. And lo and behold, in the early 2000s, Hollywood made a shot. They came out with the HD quality. HD. Now, probably some executive must have thought by themselves, this is absolute nonsense. Who the fuck will ever buy this? And lo and behold, everybody that already bought the movie, they just bought it again, but this time in HD quality. This is not where it stopped. This is where it started. In 2004, they came with the HD, but in 2006, they invented the Blu-ray, and lo and behold, everybody bought it again. In 2016, they came out with the 4K resolution and everybody bought it again. And then in 2026, they came with the AI enhanced and everybody bought it again. And the director's cut and everybody bought it again. And people just kept on buying the same movie they already bought in different formats and different resolutions. Lo and behold, they convinced us to buy what we already bought. Why? Because some guy in the company asked themselves, what would it look like if this would be easy? And the answer was, well, we don't even have to make new movies anymore. We just sell them what they already bought. That's the answer to the question. And so what does this mean for creatives like ourselves? Well, we have to ask ourselves a question. What would my art career look like if this would be easy? And so let's go back to the Damien Hirst example early on in this video. Is Damien Hirst selling original art? Is Jeff Koons selling original art? Do billionaires somehow really like circles? Oh, Dries, billionaires love circles so much that they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for circles. Well, if that is the case, then why aren't they paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for your circles, Patrick? Here's the reality. Patrick, let me tell you this. Damien Hirst hasn't sold a single circle in his life. It is not about circles. It never has been about circles. Damien Hirst hasn't sold a single artwork, an original artwork, in his entire life. Why is it that Thomas Downing, who made circle paintings decades before Damien Hirst, didn't sold the goddamn thing? I'm exaggerating a little bit here, okay? Didn't sold the goddamn thing. And Damien Hirst sold massive amounts of art. Why? Because there's a difference between Damien Hirst and Thomas Downing, and it's not the spot paintings. The difference is that Damien Hirst has a brand. Damien Hirst has been selling the brand. That's the only thing he has been selling for the last 2 decades. And so there are no spot paintings. There is no original art. It is just brand. The only reason it works for Damien Hirst is because of brand. The only reason people are buying Fight Club DVD in a higher resolution is because of the brand. The brand is the only reason. They already watched the movie. There's nothing about the movie anymore that they need to watch. They watched it. They probably watched it 2 or 3 times and they know they can download it for free online. They don't want the movie. They want the limited edition package. They want to belong. They want a brand. Now, why is this the most important thing for you to realize? The most important thing that you could possibly realize at this moment? Well, AI is changing the world as we speak. It's already better at communicating than the lower 20% of people in the world. And so what does that mean? Well, in the next 10 years, it's going to become better than 99.99% of artists out there. Meaning that when it does, everybody will use it to build their brand. Not only that, it will be better at everything than you, at everything. And it will be faster than you at everything by 100x, 200x, 300x, 400x. And so the only thing that survives is brand. And what does that really mean? What does that truly mean? It means that for the last 200 years, -5, the last 5 years, okay, but 200 years before that, you couldn't become an artist. There were gatekeepers, there were gallerists who decided who became an artist and who didn't. Same in the music industry, same in every single art industry out there. And then suddenly, for the last 5 years, there was a small window in which social media came and changed everything. And suddenly the gatekeepers were gone and you could just randomly become an artist. You could just randomly become an artist based on your own skill level, on the merits of skill. This is very strange. This is a very rare moment and it will last another 5 to 10 years before AI closes that window forever. This is the last moment. This is your one shot. This is the only opportunity that you have as an artist. There is nothing else. If you don't build a brand today, you will not be able to build a brand anymore 15 years from now. It will be over. The only people that will be able to build a brand are people who already have money. And so this is the last moment you have. What is the law of least effort when it comes to creativity? Simple. Build a brand. And so then the question becomes, well, how are you going to build a brand? How are you going to build a brand? And the answer is, of course, through the Artist Formula, an online residency I've built where I give you the exact blueprint that I use myself, the exact steps that I use myself, 10 years of my life compressed in a couple of hours so that you can go faster than anybody else. Speed matters. Link in the description, check it out. Now, in order to help you build a brand before it's too late, I've made a free PDF art virality checklist that you can use to increase the chances of your posts going viral. Link in the description, there are no strings attached. That said, get the hell out of here.